Let's talk some 2016 presidential politics with a focus on the comparatively moderate Republican hopefuls. The two biggest names in that very small group are Chris Christie and Jeb Bush, but Christie has had a bad scandal-plagued 2014 so far, and that's generating some momentum for Bush. Now comes word that some of the biggest Republican donors are, according to the Times, considering abandoning Christie in favor of Bush. The Times suggests that many of those donors have geographical ties or, like Christie himself, have personal ties to the Bush family. Christie's fundraising for George W. Bush in 2000 paved the way for Christie to be named U.S. Attorney, which then propelled him to the governor's mansion. Of course, Jeb Bush has some potential problems of his own, like his last name and his family. While lots of Republicans still love his father, George H.W. Bush, on the right, the lasting impact of the George W. Bush presidency on the left could make both the GOP nomination and the White House harder to get. And never underestimate how important the perceived ability to win a general election can be as an influence in the primary. So two questions to ask tonight. I'm going to get to the viability of Jeb Bush overall in just a second, but this split between Christie and Bush, everything that I've read, they like each other, they get along fairly well. There just doesn't seem to be enough room in the same space for the two of them, right? I
don't see how the two of them could coexist, except maybe on a shared ticket, but that's not a terribly diverse ticket. No, I don't think there's enough oxygen in the room for both of them. They're cut from the same mold, but it's nice to see that they're not talking about Rand Paul.
Is there enough big dollar Republican backing for Chris Christie if some of those donors defect to Jeb Bush? And you know, this is money that Christie was counting on. And we didn't hear a word from Jeb Bush until Christie started to slip a little bit with these scandals. So,
I mean, to find enough money. I mean, it's not a statewide race. It's not a congressional race. It's a national race. I mean, we're talking about increments in the tens of millions of dollars, and I think we spent $1 billion more on, in the last campaign cycle, probably much more than $1 billion. So what? If it's a difference between 30 million or 60 million or 15 million or 22 million, so long as the spread is somewhere near each other, I don't see defections like that. It's probably more of a media game right now, which counts, and perception becomes reality than it is in any sort of, you know, spreadsheet analysis. It's too soon for that.
And that's a key point. Perception becomes reality. And money, whether it's accurate or not, likes to go towards the winner.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
So what the money folks are saying is that Governor Christie is damaged goods. Maybe he can recover. I don't see it, but maybe he can. I don't see any other Republican out there that could give Hillary Clinton, if she's the Democratic nominee, a run for her money except for Mr. Jeb Bush.
Well, this begs the question whether Christie's done enough to rehab his image in the wake of the scandals. He's certainly been trying to for the last couple of months, but do you think he's been unsuccessful? I mean, he hasn't been hurt that badly in the polls from what we've seen so far.
As of now.
But
he's done.
But if the big donors are starting to run away from him.
Well, there's a difference between rehabbing your image and putting a luster back on and putting the shine back on versus, you know, a successful legal strategy to ward off an investigation. His aides don't have to release their emails. Well, that's not a success. That just means you're not getting in more trouble this week. But I don't think he's done well to reposition and rebrand himself or recover from this.
And I'm glad you said this week.
Right.
Let's keep in mind, this is not over.
Right.
You have a federal investigation underway. A U.S. attorney is looking into this. A U.S. attorney, we don't know what's going to happen down the road. Neither does Governor Christie. But in the meantime, elections go on. Right. So whether maybe he can turn this around. But I'm trying to figure out the scenario that he might be able to do it.
Because it's not just him getting better, it's everybody else falling apart. So Jeb Bush, of course, puts Florida back into play for the Republicans and other southern states.
Though he's still losing to Hillary Clinton in a heads-up matchup.
Hillary's occupying a whole separate lane. It's not even part of this world anymore.
All right, let me put my neck on the line here. Let me lay down on the tracks. I am convinced that Jeb Bush cannot win the White House in 2016.
Sorry.
Because let me finish my thesis before you attack it.
Go ahead, Mr. Thesis.
That's professor to you.
Professor, yes.
It's too close to the George W. Bush presidency. There's still a hangover. I mean, look at the numbers for U.S. intervention in foreign conflicts, which is at an all-time low. Nobody wants us to get involved around the world because we're still feeling the sting from Afghanistan and Iraq, and that's all on the Bush family name, thanks to George W. Bush.
Nobody's out there rehabbing the W presidency. Meanwhile, Bill Clinton just gave a 2-hour speech at Georgetown talking about the successes of his 2 terms economic program as a reflection of how good Hillary would be in the White House.
Bush is trying to rehab his image. He's painting.
You've heard his presidential library. Have you heard? They pose an impossible situation and say, well, what would you do? As if to say, we did the best we could with the information we had at the time. And
Now,
that just doesn't cut it.
I know you're going to say to me, New York does not represent the country. But Mayor de Blasio, his interracial marriage, did it help him or did it hurt him?
It helped him in New York.
All right, it helped him in New York. I am telling you, first of all, most people and outside of the political community realize that Governor Bush, he's considered the different Bush. Many have said, and you know this better than all, you're playing the role of devil's advocate here, arguing the other side. You know that there are many people that believe he's the one, Jeb Bush, that should have been in the White House as compared to the president that we had. So when he campaigns with his Mexican-American wife, when he pulls out his daughter that's been through, they're kind of close to de Blasio here. They had a daughter that went through drug rehab. He had a daughter that went through drug rehab. He can connect with many Americans in ways that the Bush family has not been able to.
If they even give him a chance, though, because the last name, they might not even, a lot of people might not even be willing to hear the sales pitch.
Really?
Let's see what happens with the midterm elections. We'll come back and discuss this some more.
I knew we were forgetting an election.
Who else? What, Rand Paul?
It might be. Marco Rubio. You never know. We're going to wrap up RFL
Are you serious?
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley. We'll be right back after this.